I've got another shot here of, and it's, I know, difficult to see, Mr. President, but we were walking down a street that was empty except for bodies a few months ago, and these little markets had opened back up. And we walked down the street, and in this case it was mostly American soldiers walking with us, except for these young men in the green jackets, which they call in this community the Sons of Iraq. And our military actually pays them to help patrol every day. They have walkie-talkies. And when I asked the colonel, when all these citizens came running out to us, why were they not worried about them blowing themselves up and killing all of the soldiers and us who were walking down the street? And the colonel responded, because we know everyone who's here. And a lot of these folks from the markets came out and hugged our soldiers. And I couldn't have felt better to see our soldiers so appreciated in that area, and to see the these young men with walkie-talkies. Their job is to patrol and to make sure that if any stranger comes to the community, that they notify the Iraqi army and the American army so that these people can be checked out. But we saw a number of trucks with mattresses and furniture piled high of people moving back to this little community who had moved out months and years before because Al-Qaeda had run them out. But we walked down several blocks, probably 80 to 100 markets that had reopened, and the people were glad to see us. They were cheerful. They feel like they have their community back. We haven't won this war yet, but we could see everywhere we go that Iraq is standing up and taking back their country for themselves. And our troops, along with the Iraqi troops who we've helped to train, and the Sons of Iraq, are guarding and protecting their community. I want to talk about one Marine here. This is Major Middleton, who actually went to Porter Gaud High School in Charleston. He's a Marine working in the training base where we're training Iraqi soldiers. And every 3 weeks we're producing 2,500 new Iraqi soldiers who go straight from that camp to the battlefield. And they're being trained with the same equipment and arms that they'll be using when they get there, because this is where a lot of the equipment is being delivered. He's proud of what he's doing. Everywhere we went, our troops wanted to convince us that what we were doing was necessary, it was right, it was working, and we could win it. And it was important to them that we know it. When I asked them what do they need that they don't have, the answer I got more than any other answer was, just don't forget us. And some of the rhetoric on this floor has sent the signal to our troops that we're forgetting them and don't appreciate what they are doing. And this Marine, away from his family, just like all the other Marines and soldiers and airmen that we see there, many of them away from their children and spouses for over a year, we know what sacrifices they're making. But I'm afraid that these Marines are not respected in some parts of this country. We saw it from, I'm afraid, the Democrats on the Berkeley City Council in California. And some here may say that's an isolated situation, but it's not, because they're taking their signals from what they hear right here on the Senate floor. And they call our Marine recruiters unwelcome intruders. They call them thugs. They call them bush murderers. If you'll see the video on what they said about our Marines, while our Marines are sweating and bleeding and dying for us and our freedom. What the Berkeley City Council did was not freedom of speech. The protesters have had their freedom of speech for months, but that wasn't good enough for them. They wanted the power of government behind them to support their point of view at the expense of the Marines and all Americans who appreciate our Marines and love what they do. And we need to recognize that some of the things that have been said right here are signaling Americans and people like the Berkeley City Council to show a disrespect for people like Major Middleton, who's willing to put his life on the line for us. I've introduced a bill we call a Semper Fi Act, named after the Marine motto, which means always faithful. And it's just to rattle the cages a little bit of the City Council in Berkeley to tell them, okay, if you want to take exception to our federal mission there in Berkeley, then certainly you don't deserve these secret earmarks that we've sent to Berkeley in the last several months. But the Marines are always faithful, and they always have been. They're faithful to our country, they're faithful to each other, and we need to be faithful to them and all of those that are fighting for us. And this discussion here on the floor, which is again trying to have it both ways, that we support our troops, but we don't. We don't when we don't support the very mission we've asked them to give their lives for. We can't have it both ways. And we can't keep having this discussion that questions before the whole world the mission that we've asked our soldiers and Marines and Airmen and Coast Guard and all our men and women in uniform and the civilian support staff that we have in Iraq and Afghanistan and throughout the world that are fighting this war on terror. We're going to win this war on terror because of the resolve that we have to be free and peaceful as a nation. And I hope that we'll get that message here that our troops have in Iraq and Afghanistan and around the world, that sometimes you have to fight for the freedom that we have here in this country, and now is the time that we have to fight. And the fact that we've shown resolve in the last year has resulted in clear successes in Iraq that are undeniable. And we know we can win this battle, but this battle isn't going to be the last one. The terrorists are going to be here for a generation or more. And if they're not in Iraq, they're going to be in Pakistan, or they're going to be in Afghanistan. They're going to be somewhere, if they're not here, doing their deeds, their terrorist deeds, against the peaceful people of the world. We have got to show resolve, and our enemies must know that we will never stop until we root them out and do away with them. I'd like to make one last comment because the folks from South Carolina in many ways are very involved with the effort in Iraq. And in fact, the airmen and women at the Charleston Air Force Base flying C-17s carry more of the cargo and supplies and arms into Iraq than any other base in our country. This is one of the teams in a C-17 that flew us out of Afghanistan back to Kuwait on our way home. But we actually had 3 teams out of Charleston that moved us from Kuwait to Baghdad and Baghdad back to our intermediary stop. But they're proud of what they're doing. And they wanted us to know and me to tell you that they believe this mission is important and that we can win it. And all they need is our support. Not our empty rhetoric, but our real support and our belief in them and what they're doing. I came back with that belief and that resolve that what we're doing is right, and if we continue what we're doing, we will win, and we will continue to set the terrorists back on their heels and keep our country safer. So I thank the men and women from Charleston Air Force Base who are making all Americans proud as they serve all over the world on their mission. And with that, Mr. President, I yield back.